Thank you for coming to an event like this. As Jay mentioned, I want to thank, I have family here, my wife Sharon, my cousin Marilee and Rick over there. I got a semi-filled table from Roosevelt University led by my dean, Lynn Weiner. Way in the back, but they're still in the room, some of the fellows from the East Bank Club who had promised to be on their best behavior, and two of them actually bought a book, which is just raised the intellectual level of that group. I also want to thank Skinny, but Skinny should thank me because I helped save his life yesterday when he did a 180 in the water. And of course, my buddy Laurence Msall for being part of the 4th edition. And last but not least, I have to mention my old pal and co-author Melvin G. Holly, who I have written with for so many decades. But Mel is unable to attend. He has some illness problems, but good long pal of mine. And by the way, the book is on sale at Amazon prices in the back, plus 29 cents for my autograph. So that's exactly what, check it out, $33. And the more we sell, the less I have to bring back to the SIU press. All right, let's get into this, and I will try and take 15 minutes. And for some of you who know me, 15 minutes is usually a half hour. Some former students, by the way, that's Tim Thomas over there from the Homeland Security, who was a student of mine at Governor State, who volunteered on Pulaski Day to help me out, and I appreciate it. Give Timmy a hand. Timmy's wife is a good friend of mine also, and our family, Latasha, the fighting alderman of the 17th Ward. So good to have Timmy here. Anyway, here we go. The book's purpose in the 4th edition. It's a straightforward analysis of every 20th century mayor of Chicago, with a little 19th and now a 21st century edition. Many chapter contributors attended probably the single greatest political event in my life. That was the December 2nd, 1985 session at the Chicago Historical Society. People like Professor Lou Masadi from Northwestern was there, and many others. Lou's in the audience today. And what we did was we analyzed the 1983 election, and it started at 9, it ended at 7:30, and 300 of the 400 people remained. And it was the last time we saw my old mentor, Milton Rakoff, give his talk. And also we heard from someone who also just passed away, the incredible and legendary Phil Crone. But from that event, this whole idea of this book started. It's in its 4th edition. I have to thank former Mayor Rich Daley for finally giving it up. As I told Rich, there's no 4th edition until you leave office. And so thank you very much, because that 4th edition was delayed an awful long time. So here we go. The main themes of this book, and if you're really interested in Chicago politics, hopefully this is the book that will give you a insight. And by the way, St. Patrick's Day, Mother's Day, Father's Day, and you can never be too soon for Christmas giving. Here we go. 1, there are 12 major points. I could go on, but I left it at 12. Good number. 1, in Chicago, more than any other big city, the politics of the city of Chicago reflects ethnicity, religion, and race. 2, notice I didn't say issues. 2, Chicago has a weak mayor, strong council form of government. Shocking to some people, especially some of the aldermen in the audience.
I didn't get the memo.
So in order for a mayor to have any kind of influence over the city council, given the weakness of the governmental structure, he or she has to use political influence, power, intimidation, anything else to get something done. And though it's today very fashionable to say that the city council needs more power, more autonomy, every time we've had a weak mayor who's tried to let the city council run things, the city went down the tubes. Number 3, power, both economic and political, is the key to understand Chicago's growth and development. This city was founded, by the way, this is the 176th birthday for those of you who are into that, of the founding of the city of Chicago, yes. By some of the toughest, roughest businessmen who ever existed, who made this city what it is today. There were no Marcus of Queensberry rules. And in effect, that kind of business, economic go-getiveness, if that's such a word, was transferred over to the politics. Excuse me. Number 5, Number 4. Moving along too fast here. Chicago was never a city of neighborhoods. Can we finally kill that beast? It was a city of ethnic, religious, and racial enclaves. In the so-called good old days, when cholera would wipe out 6 to 10% of the people, some folks were enjoying working at the stockyards for slave wages and keeping their feet warm by putting them in cows' bellies after they slaughtered them. Neighborhoods didn't exist. They were enclaves. They were set up by individuals, mainly from the same ethnic or religious group, and no outsiders were allowed to get in. And so this notion of, somehow we were just a wonderful polyglot, a pre-United Nations city, is just a myth. And it's about time we realize that. It's a myth. The old joke that my old professor, Dick Wade, said, if an Irish girl married an Italian guy, both sides hung black crepe. So, the key to understanding Chicago, it was never a city of neighborhoods. Number 5, Chicagoans do believe in reverse federalism. City more important than the federal or state offices. Clearly, this is one of my themes that Barack Obama has sort of thrown up. It's still there, but not as much as it was before. 6, the monolithic and all-powerful political machine that came to Chicago came here later than any other major big city. As you'll read in this book, it was not until 1931 that this so-called political machine that people talk about actually took total control of the city of Chicago. And the irony of it is, and Skinny, you'll have to excuse this, the irony of this is that there is a rumor that somehow Chicago's Irish population really has a sort of an in on political organizing and political activity. It took a Bohemian Protestant, Anton Cermak, to unite the Irish of Chicago in the Democratic machine. This may come as a shock to some of you, but just because you belong to the same ethnic or racial group, it doesn't mean you sit around a campfire and sing Kumbaya. There was tremendous rivalries, especially among various factions of Irish politicians, and Anton Cermak simply overwhelmed them all with enormous support from certain select Irish politicians, Pat Nash, who became Mr. Sidewalk, Ed Kelly, who soon became Mr. Mayor, Joe McDonough, who became the treasurer, and then the godfather of a fellow named Richard J. Daley. But those folks realized that the city could not keep going along with all this factionalism, united behind Cermak, who was not the most pleasant fellow, and nevertheless, that was the beginning of the so-called machine. By the way, Mr. Cermak, though he was a Bohemian Protestant, claimed to be Catholic, and of course at his funeral it was conducted by a rabbi. And you wonder why and how he was the guy that did this, right? Okay, so, and prior to him, this city was dominated by political factions, ethnic and religious distrust, continuous elections, scrambled government. There were more government agencies back then than any other city. Granted, now we even have more. And most important, it was personality politics. In this book, you will see the key to personality politics was the family of Carter Harrison. Carter Harrison the first and Carter Harrison the second. Each man was elected mayor of Chicago 5 times. Clearly, after that, the city residents decided that would never happen again. Got it? Okay, I'm past that one. But these individuals were like a link because they were the classy Kentucky. By the way, the reason Ashland Avenue was Ashland Avenue, it's named after the farm of Henry Clay in Lexington. There was a huge Kentucky contingent in Chicago in the late 19th century, led by the Harrisons and, of course, Bertha Honore Palmer, who married Powder Palmer. She, of course, was the, next to Jane Addams, one of the most important women ever in the city. But and there's a street Honore named after her daddy. But so you had these people who mingled with the highest class, but both Harrisons also mingled with people like Hinky Dink and Bathhouse and all the Boodlers and all the other people who helped make Chicago what it is. And if you heard with Mr. Clifford from Metro talking why Chicago had such a unique experience in having one of the earliest transit systems, and not California. Kathleen, you could tell this to your brother, is because Chicago had a proven felon behind it, Charles Tyson Yerkes, who literally built the loop. And by the way, he was a pre-felon. He was like pre-garped. He was from Philadelphia, so he already was a major felon. The reality is that because you had this ethnic enclaves, because you had this distrust, there never was a citywide vision, at least not until Richard J. Daley came to power in '55. In other words, the ward was more important than downtown. Many people, working class people, never went downtown. It could have been on the moon as far as they were concerned. And individuals were identified by their ward, by their parish, or by their street corner. You know, you all know them, 71st and Jeffrey, 63rd and Halstead. You could just go all down the line, north and south. You were noted by your street corner. That inwardness prevented true so-called reform to come, though every single mayor who has ever run or who's ever governed, including people like Big Bill Thompson, always called themselves reformers. It is so easy. Just call yourself a reformer, and you're a reformer. And half the media will gobble it up like that, because they aren't the most industrious people in the world. So what you have in effect is no citywide vision. So when Richard J. came in '55 and started to rebuild downtown, it was the first construction in 25 or 30 years. So you don't have that. And till this day, people are still talking about reform. So they've added words like stakeholder and accountability and transparency, and God only knows we're living in that era right now. So it's just the tradition goes on. Number 8. Yes, number 8. Racial politics grew as a dominant issue in the last several decades of the 20th century. I teach a class on Chicago politics. Mike Bell's here, who's listens to it. And in the 19th century, there's no racial politics. There's just anger, distrust, discrimination against ethnic and religious groups. I mean, there were no good old days. But the racial component doesn't come in until the 20th century and doesn't really get to become important as far as politics in the city is concerned until after World War II. Number 9, only a few more to go. Richard J. Daley was the only, and this is the only, it's all here. In fact, if you have anybody getting married and you don't have a Bible, there it is. There it is, guaranteed. But this is somewhat questionable, but I could defend it with questions. Richard J. Daley was the only big city mayor at the time to incorporate blacks, African Americans, into his organization. The only one, because he believed very strongly a Democratic voter is a Democratic voter, and they're just the next one in line. He didn't understand, I believe, the civil rights movement, and he certainly didn't understand the rioting, but he understood Democratic votes. He also understood you win elections by addition. And so he was the only one who did that, and that's one of the reasons that machine was perpetuated from '31 until Jane Burns sort of did a, well, helped by some of the people in this room, did a number on that and ended it. Number 10, Harold Washington, who's, by the way, a Roosevelt University grad, whose intelligence, charisma, and political training in the Democratic organization, he came from the Democratic Party. In fact, though some people don't want to admit this, in the late '70s, as a legislator, he was saved in an election by the Democratic Party, led by Cecil Partee, or else he might have been out. But his training, his understanding of politics, he often said that the only person who understood politics in Chicago at the time, like him, was George Dunn, former county board chairman and friend of former Alderman Nataris. He was the perfect candidate to play divide and conquer in the classic 1983 Democratic mayoral primary, a primary which I affectionately call the mother of all primaries. If you weren't around in 1983, it wasn't pretty, but it was probably the greatest local political event anywhere in this country, ever. Number 11, Mr. Washington's death politically split the black community and allowed Rich Daley not only the ability to run for mayor, but the ability to win. Last but not least, number 12, Rich Daley's victory coalition of remaining was held firm for him in every election, remaining white ethnics, Hispanics, and lakefronters, and as he went along, more and more African Americans. So that's up until the 4th edition. Give me another 3 minutes. In the 4th edition, there is the chapter on how Rahm Emanuel became the next mayor of the city of Chicago. all the basic facts. Most of you know them already, so I'm not going to repeat them. But the four things that you'd always keep in mind was, number one, that this was the first truly nonpartisan mayoral election. Up until 1995, unlike the aldermen, who you know have a long tradition of nonpartisanship, the mayoral election was always a party primary, which is one of the reasons Harold Washington could win in '83 with 36% of the vote. So in '95, the state legislature, and there's a couple of people who were, well, Gene Reineke is here, and I'm sure he thought for sure this would really rejuvenate the Republican Party in Chicago. Today, they're at least 20%. But it was the first truly contested nonpartisan election, and what that meant is that you had to get 50% plus one of the vote in the first run to avoid a runoff. And so if you're running for that election, you want to win, but if you don't want to win, you want to come in second and prevent the guy from getting 50% plus one. It was that kind of election actually says there's something about us getting a silver medal. That's number one, which Mr. Emanuel knew better than anybody else. Number two, the money thing. It's in here. You could read it. I gave a lecture on it a couple of years ago after his election. It's incredible how much money he raised as quickly as he raised it. And of course, if you're from California, you have a very generous group of people out there who really care about Chicago. Number three, his three major opponents then had to stop him from 50% plus one, but also not alienate the other two, because if they came in second, they needed the other two to endorse them so they could beat the guy who came in first, who didn't get 50% plus one. And last but not least, Carol Moseley Braun, some of you formerly worked for her, her amateurish campaign was probably the worst in the history of Chicago, and because it was so bad, it gave Rahm Emanuel a tremendous edge, an edge that was only increased when unelected African-American alleged designators decided they wanted to run a black consensus candidate, not realizing that 1983 was history, that there was a new method of election, and doing that was simply playing right into Emanuel's hand. You know about the residency fight with the famous rebel renter and all that stuff, and you know the endorsement from President Clinton officially and the endorsement from President Obama unofficially. Mr. Emanuel received 55% of the vote, 31,000 votes more than he needed to get to 50% plus one. Last point, and what does it mean? The biggest change in Mr. Emanuel's victory wasn't so much first Jewish mayor, blah, blah, you could go on. There's always somebody who's the first in that. But his victory coalition is really amazing. It is a modified version of Harold Washington's victory coalition. You run strong along the lakefront, you sweep the African-American wards, and those formerly ethnic wards on the northwest and southwest side really don't make that much of a difference. That's the victory coalition. Now the question remains, can that be a governing coalition? And what does he have to do to maintain that coalition? No longer is it those individuals living on the big turnout ward still is the mighty 19th, but 23, 41, 38 are under heavy change given demographics with Hispanics moving in. So the question then remains, can Mr. Emanuel govern by the way he was elected? And so, given all that, on all the things I've just said, the last thing, and turn it over to Lara, is that sharing power, like playing together like good friends, has never been a tradition in Chicago for any mayor. There's no sharing. It's not like a university faculty meeting where you walk out knowing less than when you walked in. It is all about power. Whether you're William Ogden in 1837 or Rahm Emanuel in 2013, it's about power in which you want to control. So the Emanuel chapter deals with that, and for that I'll turn it over to Laurence Msall from the Civic Federation, who was founded in the 1890s with the motto, "We will drive Satan from Chicago."
Thank you, Paul. So when I agreed to write be a part of a chapter in your book. I didn't realize that there would be 14 points with 3 subpoints, and then I would get one of the subpoints. But that's the way it turned out.
My name's on the cover, guy.
Exactly. Seriously, thank you, Paul, for this great opportunity to be a part of the book and for inviting me here today. Before I get started, I need to recognize that the real force behind not just the chapter, but the Civic Federation are both our members and our staff. Many of them are with us today. In particular, we have our former research director, Lise Valentine, who is now the city's Deputy Inspector General, and also Sarah Wetmore, our current research director, with us. So if all of the Civic Federation staff and many of our board members are here today, would just stand up and be recognized for 1 minute. Thank you for all you do. For all of you public officials who are always blaming me for where the Civic Federation gets its ideas, you now have the truth. You can't stay on top of the slippery finances of the state of Illinois and the 8 other local governments we monitor without great colleagues, and we certainly have them. Also, in the J. Doherty tradition, I want to recognize, as was pointed out, today is the city's 176th birthday. It's also my wife's birthday today. She's not here, but more importantly, her father is here and her Uncle Bill, so I wanted to thank them for coming all the way down from the north side, which, as many of you know, does not have a Pulaski Avenue to celebrate. So they came down to celebrate with their Polish son-in-law. The city of Chicago and the Civic Federation's history is clearly intermeshed. In our chapter that we write about the city of Chicago, when it was incorporated 176 years ago, its official motto, Urbis in Horto, a Latin phrase which translates, as my Latin teacher, Mr. Chandler, who's with us from St. Ignatius, who's also with us today, would say, it translates to city in a garden. But too often, the city is not so much a garden, and as we rebranded the city of Chicago as Urbs in Debitum, that is, city in debt. The Civic Federation has been looking at the level of debt and the level of financial distress of the city for some time. When, during the campaign for mayor in 2011, I had the privilege of sitting down at the request of most of the candidates. All of the candidates eventually did come in and talk with us: Gary Chico, Miguel Del Valle, Rahm Emanuel, Carol Mosley Braun, Patricia Van Pelt Watkins, and even William Doc Walls. And after being briefed on the condition of the city's finances, almost all of them walked away saying, who would want this job of mayor of Chicago? When Mayor Emanuel took office in 2001, he inherited 2011, I'm sorry. In 2011, his administration inherited an immediate budget gap of approximately $650 million. Growing long-term liabilities threatened the city's survival of its pension funds, and a persistent structural deficit, not to mention the level of public confidence in the city government was rather low, especially the backlash related to the parking meter privatization. In the book, we focus on 3 of the city's most urgent fiscal problems: its persistent structural deficit, its inadequate corporate reserves, and its growing long-term liabilities. Since taking office, Mayor Emanuel and his team have made significant progress on one of these issues, limited progress on the other, and hardly any progress on the third. First, the success side. Mayor Emanuel and his team, and I should point out, the mayor deserves a lot of credit for bringing a very talented team. I think one of the other things that Mayor Daley deserves a lot of credit for was the team and his ability to attract people into government. The current financial team of Mayor Emanuel is not only easy to work with, but they're very bright and experienced. So on the successful area of the financial situation that the mayor's team, Mayor Emanuel's team, has dug into, it's the structural deficit. When Mayor Emanuel took office, the gap between projected revenues and expenditures had grown from $58 million in fiscal year 2002 to $635.7 million in the last year of the Mayor Daley administration. The city was experiencing significant drops in revenue because of the economic recession, but also a growing problem was that unsustainable increases in personnel expenses were occurring. During that same time, during the last term of Mayor, the last full term of Mayor Daley, Richard M. Daley, The city personnel costs, which represent about 80% of the city's operating budget, had grown by about 9% in that last term. But interestingly and quite challenging for the city was during a time when the mayor had actually reduced the number of city workers by about 7.6%. Part of it is the magnitude of the automatic increases as well as the growing health and pension costs of the city. Now Mayor Emanuel and the city council deserve credit in their first year budget of 2013 for helping to contain some of those personnel-related costs, including getting some work rule adjustments and delving more into managed competition, including reducing overtime and looking at privatization of things such as garbage and recycling and putting it on a grid system. While the city dramatically reduced its reliance on one-time revenues, still the city of Chicago, and many of you are all aware that the city, in the privatization efforts, when we privatized the Skyway and then privatized the parking meters, and right before that we privatized or turned over the parking garages under Millennium Park and those owned by the Park District. The city, and its Mayor Daley in his last term, used an enormous amount of those one-time revenues to prop up the operating budget. It has a compounding impact. It not only draws down your reserves, or what was supposed to be used for reserves because we don't have a rainy day fund, but it puts a hole in future year budgets because that money's not going to be available the next year. The city has taken some significant steps to replenish its reserves under Mayor Emanuel, but it's nowhere near to the level that were drawn down during the last term of Mayor Daley. Steps in the last 2 years to close the structural gap have been of the magnitude of tens of millions of dollars rather than the hundreds of millions of dollars. Mayor Emanuel is going to have to go, and his team are going to have to go much further to reduce that structural deficit and not rely on one-time revenue sources. Where there has been limited progress, there has been limited efforts to restore the reserve funds, as I mentioned. The city of Chicago, in fiscal year 2009, right before the election, had corporate unallocated reserves of less than 0.09%, compared to the 17% that would be recommended from the Government Finance Officers Association. I mentioned that the city drained many of its long-term assets, which were the result of the lease reserves, by using them to close the operating deficits. At a time when the city should have been preserving and adding its reserves, it was spending them down. Now the city of Chicago faces great financial distress. We saw a prime example of that this year when the city did not have any budgetary reserves and had to borrow to pay approximately $78 million for the lawsuit settlement, the tort settlement for the wrongful hiring of firefighters. The borrowing cost to the taxpayers of that level of tort settlement is very significant and very expensive. Other reasons why the city, it doesn't always appear to be obvious to some of the people involved in the budget process. One of the obvious reasons why the city of Chicago needs reserves more than ever is because of what's going on in Springfield and Washington. The state of Illinois' ongoing fiscal crisis is not only impacting the city because of its slowness in transferring funds to the city of Chicago. The state of Illinois' horrible credit rating pushes down the city of Chicago and other local governments' credit ratings, thus increasing the cost of borrowing. The federal sequester, which we are experiencing just now, is also going to put tremendous pressure on an already rather frail city financial situation. And for those of you who are no longer getting the newspapers at home, the city faces yet an even bigger challenge, and that's the one that faces the state of Illinois, the city's pension funding crisis. Late in the Daley administration, I served on a commission related to the future of Chicago's pensions, and the goal of the commission was to strengthen Chicago's pension funds. The commission reported that the police and firemen's pension funds in Chicago were likely to run out of assets within 10 years if nothing was done. We had levels of funding for our policemen of less than 40% for their pension. For the firemen, it was about 32%. Municipal employees was just under 50%, and the laborers were at about 73%. Just as Mayor Daley was packing up his office and before Mayor Emanuel knew what hit him, the General Assembly stepped in to try to help the city of Chicago. In an effort to stabilize the pension funds, they established that the city of Chicago would be required to get to 90% funding for its police and fire funds by the year 2040. It also, as a means of alleviating some of the burden, increased the retirement age by 5 years for future Chicago police and firemen. However, the impact of that 90% goal by 2040 was coupled with a statutory requirement that the city of Chicago in their fiscal year 2015 would have to increase its contributions to the pension funds by $733 million. Unfortunately, the General Assembly's help ended with identifying the problem. It did not provide for how the city of Chicago would make that increased contribution. An increase of $733 million to stabilize the city's police and fire pension funds will require a near doubling of the city's property taxes. So the city of Chicago faces an enormous financial cliff in 2015, which is why Mayor Emanuel last May went down to Springfield and thanked the General Assembly for their help in the pension reform area and presented another framework that he would like them to consider. He indicated in all seriousness that the city of Chicago could not double their property tax levy just to solve the pension problem. He called on the members of the General Assembly to follow a framework that would temporarily suspend the annual automatic increase of the pensions, increase the employee contributions, increase the retirement age, and introduce a 401k-like plan for employees. Now, almost a year later, the General Assembly has failed to act on any of the pension reforms proposed by Mayor Emanuel, the Governor Quinn, or anyone else, and the funding levels continue to drop. Without reform, the municipal and laborers' pension funds are projected to run out of money within the next 12 years. The city recently announced an agreement on the positive side with the Police Sergeants Association, which includes an increase in the employee contributions and the retirement age, as well as a reduction in the annual automatic increase and a call for 90% funding of the city's pension funds by 2040. I should point out, in fairness to the policemen and the firemen, that they don't get that 3% compounded automatic increase that members of our Illinois General Assembly, judges, and other state employees receive. They receive a simple increase, 3%, not compounded. The proposal for the municipal or for the sergeants would reduce that even more and would actually have a freeze every other year as it goes forward. This agreement is truly a start, but it's a limit. It's limited in its impact if the State General Assembly does not embrace the agreement that has been reached by the Sergeants Union and the City of Chicago. They cannot affect it without statutory changes. So financially, what do we see on the horizon for our triathlete mayor? Most of his work is uphill from here, both financially and politically. Continued work with the unions and members of the General Assembly has to be a priority for fixing the pension system. The City of Chicago's public school system this summer faces an announced budget deficit of over $1 billion. A good portion of that, about almost $400 million of that, is tied to the increased pension contribution pressures that will be facing the Chicago public schools because they've been on a partial pension holiday for the last couple of years. Also facing the mayor is a decision on what to do about the city's retiree health care benefits following the expiration of the 1993 Korshak Decree, which ends the city's legal obligation to provide retiree health care after June 30th this year. So usually in these type of remarks, I would say that the next couple of years are going to be critical for this government. But what's at stake for the city of Chicago, it's not the next few years, it's the next few months. If pension reform stays stuck in the Sangamon County House of Mirrors, it's hard to see how Chicago Public Schools will be able to open or will be able to present a balanced budget to meet the statutory requirements. It's also hard to see how, if the city of Chicago doesn't reduce its unfunded liability, that it's going to be able to avoid a huge property tax increase just to meet the statutory requirements of Springfield. Hopefully our mayor will be able to make progress. I think all of us would agree that he has shown enormous energy and a willingness to roll up his sleeves on a lot of complex financial issues. Thank you.
We have some questions. We'll go real fast because, you know, City Club plays by the rules. By the way, after listening to Laurence, you better get this book because the way it's going, there may not be a fifth. I mean, just
You're going to need a fifth.
Really fast, we'll knock these off. I have a couple here for Laurence, but let's go real fast. Joyce Saxon, Board of Governors. Did Big Bill Thompson, around 1919, start our machine? No, he was a Republican, and it was personality politics led by such well-known leaders of reform like Al Capone. 2, what role did Jacob Harvey, this is anonymous.
It's mine.
Alderman Notaris, you get a bonus then. Okay. What role did Jacob Harvey play, if any, in the politics? He was one of the most important people in giving Richard J. Daley the opportunity to not only become mayor, but before that, 1953, to become Cook County Democratic chairman. And Mayor Richard J. Daley, of course, told him that this job of chairman and mayor were too big for one man. And that one didn't last very long. That promise didn't last very long either. But no, Jacob Harvey was there, and he was the link. And if we had a lot of time, he was the link that told Mayor Kelly it's time to retire. Pope Benedict XVI, nothing compared to Ed Kelly being told he can't be mayor anymore. Okay, this is from J.B. Johnson, 4th Ward candidate for alderman in Park Ridge. I get a little worried there. Do you ever believe Chicago will be free of political influence across the board? No. This is from Don Hyder. Don was introduced, and that's enough publicity for him. Laurence, why don't you, this is about the budgetary problem. Remember, he was the transition, no, you were the head of the budget for Jane Byrne. Chief Financial Officer? And by the way, that title is not on his resume. Go ahead.
So this is from Don Hyder at Kellogg, and on the top it says, as part of the Kellogg paper, think bravely. So, Blandick left Byrne, huge deficits. Byrne left Washington, even bigger deficits. Sawyer left Daley, big budget deficits. And Daley left Rahm, shocking, gambling in Casablanca, deficits. Besides pensions issues, what really new or different about this transition? Well, I think what's really new or different about this transition is, I mean, you answer it in your own question, the pension liability. It is a financial challenge, and the level of debt that the city has far in excess of what we see in other in other cities. But unique to that is the fact that our state is crumbling at the very same time. So the natural place where the city of Chicago would be seeking assistance and help would be the state of Illinois. Even the federal government has limited the amount of resources that it's going to make available. So it's been a much more difficult transition. Many of the things that I'm familiar with in terms of Harold Washington's transition and the first or the second Mayor Daley transition were much more straightforward, that did not require the Illinois General Assembly to grant the city of Chicago pension relief, or require that you'd have to bargain with not just your own government, but with the people in downstate Illinois as to what changes you wanted in the statutes.
Good answer. Bob Manwith, former WGN big dog. Do either of you see any hope for pension reform in the General Assembly this spring? I will say no.
And I will say, as the only way that I can wake up in the morning is that basically I'm an optimist, and I believe that the government can and will deal with this. And I'll tell you why they're going to, again, reinforcing why I believe they'll have to deal with it this spring. The state of Illinois, besides having the worst rated credit in the United States, is putting enormous pressure on the Chicago public schools and the city of Chicago. They simply cannot get to the other issues that they want to work on. The state of Illinois pulled back its bond offering a couple of weeks ago on the eve of issuing about $500 million of debt. If you don't believe the Civic Federation, you can look at the rating agencies and what they're warning the state of Illinois, and it's really risked the collapse of everything that the state needs to do.
Okay. John Ferris, another former student of mine. Where are you, John? Raise your hand. There you are. I don't know, these damn students have gray hair. I don't get it. Okay. 2 questions. Why is your book same price retail versus Kindle? Like I would know that answer. 2, constitutionally, oh, this is good. You'll like this one. Constitutionally, on pension reduction, city will not win in court, I guess, so they just better bite the bullet and reduce future employees.
Well, there's a couple assumptions there. One, that you could reduce the number of current public employees to a level to basically address a $20 billion unfunded pension liability for the major governments in Chicago. There wouldn't be anybody left to basically provide the services, and we'd basically be running a healthcare and pension system. The other is that, without a doubt, whatever Springfield does, whatever the legislature enacts in terms of pension reform, it's going to be challenged in the courts. We know that every time Governor Quinn, who's tried to close a facility, whether it's a prison or a state facility for the developmentally disabled, it's been challenged in the courts. But clearly, our elected state Supreme Court will have to decide whether our various arguments about what can be changed or not. And the sooner we get to that decision, the sooner our Supreme Court weighs in, we'll all be in better shape, because if in fact we can't change the benefits for employees going forward or retirees in terms of their compounding or automatic increases that are in effect, then it'll have to be a much different conversation. I almost always say, and I want to say, the government employees have done nothing wrong. The city and the state employees have done everything that they were required to. They made their contribution. They went to work every day and earned the benefits. The problem is our government underfunded these pensions, and they underfunded or made decisions based on other financial pressures. But now we have a situation at the state where the state is teetering toward financial collapse. And if we can't change the benefits going forward, then we're going to have a much different conversation.
Probably get the boats, the rowboats. So.
Oh, the gambling boats or the
No, the ones that were used on the Titanic after the iceberg.
Right.
Lifeboats.
Right.
Thank you, Charlie Gardner, part of your board and part of the board of the Roosevelt University. Why can't Chicago alone get a casino? Charlie, it's called, what'd you call Sangamon County House of Mirrors? Nothing happens in Springfield where there's not a trade-off for something else, and we haven't quite made that deal yet. But it's a long, involved issue, and I think Mayor Emanuel.
Can I add to that?
What?
Can I add to that
Sure.
one other thing? Charlie knows this well as someone who's served on the Gaming Commission for the state of Illinois. But one of the things that is frustrating for the Civic Federation is this notion that casinos is the panacea for our financial problems. All of the gambling in the state of Illinois combined, there's 10 boats right now in Illinois. All of the revenue collected for the state totals less than $500 million. So we face enormous financial deficits at the state and local level. Casinos can be part of an entertainment complex, in which case we'd much prefer to know where it's going to be before they enact it, before they pass it, but it is of a limited financial, and it's inherently unreliable to fund our governments.
And don't forget, every legislator who has a boat, even though they may not be contributing that much, is not going to be on this, because a big Chicago casino, you could forget about the ones that circle our city. There's also tremendous political involvement, which we don't have time for. Keith Koneman, who'll be here talking about his book on Richard M. Daley. Question for each speaker. One-word answer. Are you in favor of term limits for mayor? No.
No.
Okay. 2 more questions, and we'll get out of here. We're in overtime. Mark Weiermiller always comes in with a very interesting question, though he still hasn't bought a book. Property tax and sales tax are huge. Is this the only solution to raise taxes on Chicago residents? Will we become Detroit? Sorry, Lynn. Will we become Detroit?
So the revenue answer is not a comprehensive or satisfying result. The city of Chicago already has one of the highest sales tax, and this book isn't about all levels of government, but I think County Board President Preckwinkle deserves some credit for the county board for ratcheting back the sales tax increase of her predecessor so we're no longer the absolute highest of any major urban center on sales tax. We also tax just about everything we can in the city of Chicago, from bottled water to amusement to utilities. So we have a good breadth, and if you're interested in learning more about it, you can go to our website. We have some nice charts that lay that out for you. It can't, I mean, one of the things that we fear, it's not just for the city of Chicago, but it's also for the state of Illinois. This economic uncertainty, this financial uncertainty of the state is forcing businesses not to invest in Illinois because they don't know what the tax policy, they don't know what, when they will, how to project what the return on their investments will be. We lost population in the last census. We cannot afford the city of Chicago's infrastructure without a growing population. So anything that draws people out of the city is a bad thing for the city of Chicago.
However, in its defense, the Loop recent report is the fastest growing central city in America. So all you suburbanites, for all those years that you did this, times are changing. Now they all have to do is get jobs and pay taxes. Another anonymous, though this looks like a Bert Notaris question. What about Reagan taking away revenue sharing? That was in the early 1980s. I was an elected official then, and it cost my little township at least $10,000. It was an idea that time had come. It's just very difficult. Some of the problems with revenue sharing, even at our little level, there was very little oversight. And I know it's hard to believe, but it was somewhat political. Last but not least, Linton Olson. Linton, you have a great question here. What will Chicago be doing to celebrate the 150th anniversary of the National Academy of Science? I'm sure it's going to be great. Thank you all very much. Laurence, thank you.